Welcome to another edition of the Official Jets podcast, powered by Amazon Web Services. EA in Florham Park holding it down, Ethan in Hoboken. And on today's show, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about the weekend moves that were reported, most notably former Colts cornerback Pierre Desir, Panthers offensive lineman, or should I say former Panthers offensive lineman Greg Van Roten. The Jets reportedly added Marqui Christian, let go of a couple players as well. EA and I are going to break down the state of the Jets secondary, who's still left, who's on the team, and then we'll finish things up with a little bit of a dream scenario here. Pro Football Focus tweeted, who would be your PFF dream secondary? EA and I are going to both give our answers. But EA, first things first, welcome to another week of working from home. How was your weekend?
Greens, the weekend was terrific. Was able to get outside with the little one and my pup, but listen, made sure that I was keeping safe distance away from other folks. But it was beautiful on Saturday, and actually on Sunday it was nice as well. So got out for some runs again, keeping my distance away from folks. But sunshine was great today. Unfortunately, I'm sure the weather is similar in Hoboken, man. It is rainy, it is cold, it is gloomy. But we're still going to bring you the Jets news, the NFL news, and we're going to brighten up your day.
Yeah, I feel like if this work from home scenario happened when the weather was like it is today all the time, I feel like we'd be a lot more it'd be a totally different ball game. Right now it's 5:14 p.m. on Monday. It is raining. It is gray. This is classic New York winter weather. This is not what I was hoping for, but that's okay. Let's talk about some. Actually, I was about to say let's talk about some Pierre Desir news, but I'm looking on Twitter right now, and breaking news from Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero, both of them, they say that it was reported that the Jets have agreed to terms on a one-year extension with outside linebacker Jordan Jenkins.
Good news. I mean, obviously he's got to complete his physical and formally sign a contract, but those guys from NFL Network very busy during this time of year, as is ESPN's Adam Schefter and so many other insiders who I don't think get much sleep during this time. But Jordan Jenkins, a great locker room presence, a guy who came out of Georgia and I think continues to develop. And last year he had 8 sack screens. He did not play 16 games. I think if he had played 16 games, maybe for Greg Williams, he would have got double-digit sacks for the first time in his career. Tough, tenacious guy. Remember, he's playing at outside linebacker position. So, again, has to turn things inside. And the Jets did play the run as well as anybody in the National Football League last year, number 2 overall.
Yeah, I think Jordan Jenkins is one of those classic players where he gets better each year that he's in the league, and such is the case so far. He had 7 sacks, which led the team in 2018. Then he had 8 sacks last season, and that was a career high and a team high in 2019. So it's a good move by the Jets, and we know that Joe Douglas wants to add to corner and he wants to add to edge on defense. He alluded to that in Indianapolis. And when you look at the moves, not only with Jordan Jenkins, a minute ago or however long ago it was reported, then you look at what happened over the weekend. The Jets reportedly Pierre Desir. They re-signed Arthur Maulet, and then they reportedly signed Marqui Christian. So the Jets and Joe Douglas are doing a lot in the secondary right now. You have to imagine that edge is coming up next, whether that be through free agency or through the draft. And I actually don't think that Joe Douglas is done in the secondary. And I don't think he's done at all in free agency at all. I feel like he's just getting the ball rolling here.
Well, multiple tiers, and and Joe Douglas is systematic in his approach. The Jets are not going to be rushed in anything they're doing. They're going to make moves that are smart for their organization, not only in 2020 but long term, because all these deals have cap ramifications. You mentioned Desir. Interesting, Greens, because he played the last couple seasons with the Indianapolis Colts, and prior to Joe Douglas signing Rex Hogan on as assistant GM of the Jets. Hogan was with the Colts in 2017 and 18. Here's a guy who's a bigger cornerback, 6'1". I have listed him as big as 6'2", but we'll go at 6'1". Last year, he led the Colts with 11 pass defenses. He had 2 interceptions and 5 pass defenses in one game against the Carolina Panthers in Week 16. 36 career starts, 5 interceptions, and 34 pass defenses. And I know a lot of people are probably thinking, well, why did the Colts get rid of him? Well, we're not there. The other thing to factor into the equation is they just made a $25 million financial commitment to Phillip Rivers.
So what do you think about the move of bringing in Pierre Desir?
I like it because you said we're going to talk about the cornerback position. After the Jets make those pair of moves, releases, remember, Tremaine Johnson and Darryl Roberts were opening day starters in 2019, Greens. So they come to an agreement with Brian Poole, and they made it official on Saturday after agreeing to terms. And that's such a critical position, the nickel position. We talked about that. But they needed help on the boundary. Now you bring in a guy who's got experience. He's going to turn 30 in September. Former teammate of Nate Hairston, actually, in Indianapolis. And listen, if they were going out and playing tomorrow, and they're not, maybe your 2 corners are a couple long guys in Desir and then Bless Austin. But Arthur Maulet gives you depth and versatility behind them as well. So I think it's a smart move, Greens, because right now you're bringing in a guy who he started for a number of years in the National Football League, and he's quite capable of filling out a position outside the numbers.
Yeah, I feel like I very much like the way that the roster is shaping up, even though it feels like they're not a ton of moves. There's still like a good handful, but I like the trajectory that this roster is heading on right now. And when you look at the secondary, let's just talk quickly about who the Jets added at the safety spot. Marqui Christian, who you would assume is going to back up Marcus May and Jamal Adams, 1, and number 2, be a special teams core guy for Brant Boyer.
Well, and he's only 25 years old, so that's what I'm looking at in free agency. He did some good things with the Rams last year. In fact, former Rams defensive coordinator Wade Phillips said they used him as a hybrid linebacker at times in sub packages. So you bring in a guy like that, he's got some coverage abilities. At times last year in LA, he was asked to play one-on-one coverage, taking on tight ends. Now, the Jets are set at that safety position from a starting perspective with Jamal Adams and Marcus May. We know that. But we were talking when we did the roster reset on the podcast, is the depth behind them. Who were the guys potentially going to be there while they get Christian into the mix? And you mentioned his special teams prowess, 12 special teams the past 4 years in LA.
Yeah, and just to give a quick reset, so because it feels like there's so many moves that go on that it's almost like you need to take the time and figure out what actually happened and how the roster shapes up. And right now in the secondary for the Jets, of course, you have Jamal Adams and Marcus May. And then to your point, if you were to play tomorrow, it would probably be Pierre Desir, Bless Austin, and then Arthur Maulet's in the mix, Nate Hairston, Kyron Brown still on the roster. So the Jets still have work to do in the secondary, but still getting off on the right foot. And I think that the Pierre Desir move is a good one for the Jets, and we'll see obviously how it plays out. But he was great in 2018. And yeah, I got the sense that he was banged up last year, which hindered his play. And, if Rex Hogan, who was there in Indianapolis when Pierre Desir was there, he gives the stamp of approval. And yeah, I feel like it was a good move when it's all said and done.
Well, yeah, you needed a guy with more veteran experience out there, right? Because we're talking about Bless, and we're talking about Nate, and we're talking about guys like that, and Arthur got in the mix as well. But I don't want to say this guy fell into your lap, because you have to be prepared for everything. But when he was out there, the Jets moved quickly. The other thing about Pierre Desir is great guy in terms of locker room and also community. So he kind of fits the Joe Douglas mold in terms of player, as far as who's he bringing into the locker room. And a lot of these guys fit the bill, I would say, and he's one of them.
EA, let's now talk about Greg Van Roten, who the Jets reportedly signed over the weekend. A kid that's coming back home. I don't know if you saw his tweet over the weekend. It was him in a Jets, almost like a Jets one, not a onesie, but a little kid shirt. And he's from the area. And I feel like, again, Joe Douglas just keeping his word, reportedly adding all these offensive linemen. Why not add another one to the bunch? And if you were to play tomorrow, I'm going to steal your little anecdote from before. Where do you think he would line up? Meaning, where do you think Greg Van Roten would line up tomorrow?
Well, I have no idea. And I'm not trying to avoid the question. What I would say is that last year he started 11 games for the Carolina Panthers. What Douglas is doing here is clear. He said he was going to address the offensive line. Now on that interior, think about Jonathan Harrison, who was your starter at center last year. You bring in Connor McGovern from the Denver Broncos, who started, 31 games, I want to say, the last 2 years, or maybe all 32 the last 2 years for the Broncos at the center position. But he has also has gained experience playing guard earlier in his career. So he's kind of one of those guys who can play both center and guard as well. You bring in Van Roten. You officially resigned Alex Lewis, who started 12 games for you a year ago. Brian Winters is still on the roster. Van Roten is a guy well-traveled, played north of the border in Toronto, born in Rockville Center. So like you said, a local guy. He actually played in the Boomer Esiason Empire Challenge All-Star game back in 2008, Greens. How about that?
Wow. I covered the Empire game my first season, and I guess that would be 2016 with the Jets. And just really coming full circle there.
Yeah. Just think about another guy, when you do your research and you find out more about these guys, what does this resonate? What does this make you think of? Let me read this to you. If you really want it, you have to be willing to sacrifice a lot to get it. Because if you're one of the guys like I was, an undrafted free agent and not coming out of a big college, I didn't have the pedigree of a lot of other players. So you just have to kind of scratch and claw your way. I knew from a young age that football was something that I wanted to pursue. Scratch and crawl. Former undrafted free agent, Pro Football Focus. Oh, by the way, in your prep, you pointed this out, said he was the Carolina Panthers' most improved player in 2019. So when I hear that quote, and then we take a look at this kid who grew up in Rockville Center and find out a little bit more about his journey, I think about Joe Douglas.
Right. And to your point, not only did PFF rank him the most improved Carolina Panther, but he got some big props from five-time Pro Bowl guard Trey Turner, who played the opposite position. So Greg Van Roten played left guard for the Panthers, and Trey Turner played right guard for the Panthers. So Trey Turner gave him some major props, and I feel like he's, it's funny. I feel like you don't often see stories like this, but I when you do, they really kind of hit home because, to your point, small school, undrafted, played early on in his career in Green Bay, was cut, goes north of the border, plays with the Toronto Argonauts, and then actually finds a home in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers. And I feel like you see a lot of players that come from the CFL, not a whole lot of them stick. I mean, you think of somebody like Cam Wake, but Greg Van Roten could be in that mold where he comes back to the NFL after playing a couple seasons up north, and then he sticks. And it's one of the things where it must really come full circle for somebody like him to come back to the team that he grew up rooting for. It must be really cool for him. And I think that, again, the Jets offensive line continues to get bolstered way even before the draft comes around.
Yeah,
and the Jets could very well take a tackle then.
Greens. Exactly. Joe Douglas is not going to head in the draft saying he needs a tackle. But I will say this, that there's been 5 guys the Jets have been connected with up front this offseason. We mentioned Lewis re-signing. That's official. Then media reports are that the Jets have picked up tackle George Fant, guy played left and right side, third tight end. A lot of people like his ceiling, the former college basketball player at Western Kentucky. Connor McGovern, solid starter at center for the Denver Broncos. Josh Andrews, he provides you some more depth, I would say, on the interior. And then Greg Van Roten, another guy who lines up at the guard position. So one tackle, right? And then, well, specifically when you're just talking about McGovern, Van Roten, and Lewis, you're thinking about the three interior guys. So listen, Douglas is going to continue to look to bolster the offensive line. In no way would I say, okay, well, this is what the Jets are done with in 2020, because like you said before, the draft. And even if they didn't grab a tackle, who a lot of people think that, hey, that's obviously going to be of interest in the New York Jets at the number 11 position if they do indeed stay there. They do have 4 picks in the top 80 overall. So again, no surprise at all if the Jets go looking to help fortify that line early in the draft.
I think you can start to see the puzzle coming together with the different pieces that Joe Douglas has reportedly put on this roster. And I think if you're a Jets fan, you have to be excited because we're only less than a week from the official start of free agency. And we're actually recording this 1 week after the legal tampering period officially opened. So for the Jets to add all the players that they reportedly have and still have the second and third waves of free agency and the draft, I think you really have to like. And I think if you're a fan, you're encouraged where this team is headed. And one thing on the offensive lineman that I want to bring up, the guys that have reportedly signed with the Jets, is one of the words Joe Douglas used was versatility. And that's something that was, he said, a trait that he was looking for in offensive lineman. He said that at the Combine press conference. And when you look at guys like George Fant, experience on both the right and the left side, you look at Connor McGovern and Greg Van Roten, both have experience. For McGovern, center and guard. For Van Roten, both guard positions and center. And then you look at Alex Lewis. I don't know if he's played another guard position other than left, but then you look at guys on the roster like Jonathan Harrison. He has experience at almost every position. So it's clear to me that Joe Douglas is looking for versatility.
We'd also be remiss, Greens, if we didn't mention Josh Andrews, who played in parts in 9 games with the Colts over the past 2 seasons at both center and guard. So again, one of those guys who can shift to center and he can play guard. Last year, his most offensive snaps came in week 9 against the Pittsburgh Steelers as a former Colt filled in for an injured Ryan Kelly. That's another guy reportedly the Jets have come to an agreement with. So 5 in all, 1 is official, and 4 are 4, I should say, are agreements in place, and 4 of the 5 overall are interior players.
Okay, let's circle back to the secondary here, because I know that you brought this to my attention. Pro Football Focus earlier today tweeted out, build your dream secondary with current NFL players, and they want 3 corners and 2 safeties. So, and you wanted to give your answer, but how do you want to do this? You want to come to a joint answer, or you want to go your 5 and then my 5?
No, we can come with the joint answer. You know what I will say though, Greens, and maybe it depends on how you're going to go, and because we might have a big time disagreement, I may have to go on my own. What I will say is, if we're doing this the right way, and I like how PFF is doing this and putting that out there, I think this should have an AFC East flavor, because when I think of elite secondary players, I'm starting in the AFC East.
Okay, so are we just limiting this to the AFC East, or you want to go everywhere?
Oh no, we're going everywhere. I'm saying.
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, to your point, I think there's 2 corners and 1 safety that you could pencil in for 3 of these 5 slots. And if we're on the same page here, I'm pretty sure you'd say Stephon Gilmore, Tre'Davious White, and Jamal Adams.
Done. Check those boxes. Those are my 3. I would rank, and I don't care who you rank first, I would put Gilmore and White at the top. at the cornerback position. Jamal Adams, he's the best safety in football right now. At least last year, his season, it'd be hard to make an argument that I'd put somebody ahead of him. So I would stick with those three guys out of the AFC East.
So who would you say as your third corner because there's three corner spots, and I don't think one of them is supposed to be a slot guy. I mean, that wasn't included in the copy. So if you're picking a third corner to represent your dream secondary, who are you going with?
I don't know. That's a great question. Do you want a ball hawk in there?
Well, I mean, the guy that comes to my mind, I don't know if you agree with this. The guy that comes to my mind would be Jalen Ramsey, but I don't know. I feel like I'm missing somebody, but to me, the first guy that came to my mind would be Jalen Ramsey.
I like that call, no doubt about it. And I know this guy's a safety, but I'm just thinking about it, his skills would allow him to play at a third corner position. How about Minkah Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, that's fair. But would you consider him a safety or you consider him a corner?
No, I consider him a safety, but I'm fooling around with my lineup a little bit.
Okay, that's fair. Well, if you put Minkah, that's kind of a backdoor way to include him as a corner. So then who would you choose as your second safety?
I don't know. What do you think about Eddie Jackson?
I like Eddie Jackson. It's a little see, I was thinking about Derwin James, but I don't know how having a similar player to Jamal, I don't know how that would play out in the secondary. Obviously, they're two outstanding players, but Eddie Jackson is a ball hawk. And I think that pairing him with Jamal would be a nice little 1-2 punch. But I think you can't really go wrong with either of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, it's a fun little exercise. And the way Marcus May was playing at the end of the 2019 season, if you put this list together maybe next offseason, maybe he's going to be considered for it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that, just based on last season, who else had a great year last year? And I don't necessarily know if I'd put him in for top 5, but Devin McCourty, if you're talking about AFC East flavor, he had another great year for the Patriots, and he was leading the league in interceptions at one point. I don't know if he finished as such, but there's so many. I feel like you could go in 1,000 ways. So
you're right. You're right. I would do that third quarter. I don't think you can go wrong with Jalen Ramsey. Minkah, I was just thinking of a way to get him on the field because I think he's got special ball hawking qualities.
Okay, so we're going true or false. This is the 5 that we've come up with. Starting corners, we have Stephon Gilmore, Trey White, and Jalen Ramsey. And then the 2 safeties, we have Eddie Jackson and the Jets' own Jamal Adams.
Yeah, I like that one. I do like that.
I like it too. I'm wondering if we're forgetting anybody. Like, I feel like we're going to stop recording. I'm going to be like, dang, that's who I meant to say.
You want Darius Slay on there?
Darius Slay had a good year. I don't know if I necessarily want him on that. I think I'd rather have Trey White. I think I'd rather have our trio than Darius Slay, although I am a big fan of Darius Slay.
Yeah, listen, you can't go wrong with having Ramsey out there. He's a freak.
All right. So, in short, this is what happened. Well, let's recap the podcast here. Jordan Jenkins reportedly re-signed, and then, of course, Pierre Desir reportedly re-signed, Arthur Maulet, a whole laundry list of corners. Right before we wrap up, let's hit on the corner theme. EA, why don't you tell us who else is out there that maybe not makes sense for the Jets, but just some of the guys that are out there if the Jets continue to try to address the corners.
Well, yeah, for anybody, Greens. I mean, for anybody, the names that are out there, right, is Prince of Mukamara. The Prince is out there. Logan Ryan's still floating about. We got Ronald Darby, former Philadelphia Eagle. A former Buffalo Bill prior to that, who a few years ago was really on the upswing. I know he's dealt with some injuries. So those are 3 corners at the top of my mind right now. You're just thinking about names. How about you?
I mean, you basically covered it. Did you say Darby?
Yep.
Yeah. So I feel like this might be one of those things where maybe Joe Douglas will make a couple more moves. Obviously, we don't know who, and then could be come draft. There might be a couple corners that are called that'll be in green and white in a couple months here. So that's all
I do have a suggestion, Greens, before we get out of here. People have to follow Dennis Waszak, a great writer for the AP. He covers the Jets, been covering the Jets for a long time. As far as off-season transactions, he does it by emojis. Nobody does it better than D. Waz. So I'd encourage everybody, because if you're ever wondering, hey, where can I get my one-stop shop? Waz got it all, man. You just pull up you get your little snip tool, you snip it, then you cut and paste, and you're all set.
So you're impressed by the emojis. Is that what you're telling me?
I love it. I think
maybe we have to incorporate some emojis for something that you want to do moving forward.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind doing that. The other thing is on tomorrow's podcast, and you tell the fans to, get into the mix here. I think we should talk a lot about the draft. The number one is, how is the National Football League potentially going to change the look of it this year, being it based on technology as opposed to it being based in a major city like Las Vegas. And the second part is, okay, now that we're basically a week into free agency, because the negotiating period started last Monday, what do fans start thinking about in terms of the Jets and those 4 first picks over the first 80 overall?
Right. And tomorrow, actually, we're going to go over one of the mock drafts that is posted on our website on our mock draft article. CBS Sports came out with a 7-rounder, and we'll break down probably the first 4 rounds or so, talk about the different scenarios. But that is tomorrow's episode. That was today's episode. EA, go enjoy the rain. I'm sorry you can't go out for a run, but
I'm going walking now, brother.
Okay, well, enjoy the rain. Make sure to wear a raincoat. All right.